Way back in the 70s, Jodie Foster starred in a movie called Freaky Friday about a squabbling mother and daughter who suddenly switch places with each other. It was good. Then they decided to remake it for TV with Shelley Long as the mom. Then, once again to the big screen with Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis in the titular roles. Then again as a Disney musical, which I didn't see. And before the musical, even Rob Schneider did a version. And yes, I'm counting that version. So let's see. The made for TV, Lindsay Lohan, Rob Schneider, the musical, and now they've remade it a fifth time as a slasher comedy. And yet, Freaky was a very decent movie. It takes all the classic slasher tropes and pokes fun at them. It has a cold opening which establishes how effective the main villain is. And overall, the pace is very brisk and it doesn't feel too fast and it doesn't feel too slow. We get introduced to our main character in a pretty average setting, almost like an episode of Doctor Who, namely the episode Rose. That's what it felt like until the slashing started for a second time. We find out that the main heroine, has a tragic backstory, but is also very relatable for probably most of the folks watching this film. And they get right to the point, so to speak. They don't drag things out. They give you just enough time with each character to get a sense of who they are. And I don't know where this version of Vince Vaughn was in Psycho, but he is a lot more effective as a slasher than he was as Norman Bates. His Norman was a little too obvious, but the Butcher, as he's called, is, well, basically he's Michael Myers, but with a little more personality. And when he switches place with Catherine Newton's character, he totally has fun with it. He does not shy away from self-depreciating humor. He really comes off as a 95-pound girl who suddenly finds herself in the body of a juggernaut who now happens to be vulnerable to kicks to the groin. But as a slasher, he's not superhuman. He's strong. He's capable for a 50-year-old. And as his butcher persona, he knows what he's doing. He's not dim. He just doesn't care that what he's doing is wrong, which I found interesting. At first, I thought he was like discount Michael Myers, but I think he was more like a Dahmer type. Calculated and cold. And Catherine Newton's performance as the Butcher, she was really creepy. She had ice water in her veins, and you could tell that this Butcher's personality lacked a soul. Because when Vaughn played him, he played him without a soul. Just the drive to kill. And yet this lack of soul was able to transfer to, again, a 95-pound girl. And she was still funny as Butcher Barbie, as they called her, because now this juggernaut had to cope with the fact that he had far less strength and resilience than he used to, but he was still able to get stuff done. He just had to use more tactics. And the back and forth between these characters was fairly enjoyable to watch, fairly entertaining. As for the rest of the cast, the girls' family and friends, they had their own bits of backstory. Some more than others, I think, but all came across as very human. And then there were the slasher fodder characters. Some of them, you didn't get enough personality to gauge whether or not they deserved it. Others, it was clear from the get-go that what was being done to them was kind of merciful. In a way, the Butcher did Newton's character a favor, to a degree. Overall, it was a pretty enjoyable romp. The gore effects were practical, but not over the top. The pacing was solid. It didn't feel like it dragged any place. The main characters went through a pretty believable arc. They weren't quite who they were from beginning to end. And for some of the characters, they positively evolved. The music was, it was typical modern music, but it still managed to complement things. I would call this iteration of Freaky Friday, better known as Freaky, I dare say it's a modern day classic slasher flick. It had flavors of old school 80s slashers, but its self-aware humor and willingness to turn tropes on their ears and sort of, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Their willingness to subvert expectations, but also throw in several classic tropes, including a bit of foreshadowing at the beginning. This made for a relatively fresh take on the old trope of body switching. So if you like slasher flicks that don't take themselves too seriously, it's worth a look. And I think, for those of you who know her, Chainsaw Sally is going to have a bit of a competition with this new up-and-comer, Butcher Barbie. Shout out to all of those fans out there who get that reference. This is Metro J signing out and reminding you, sometimes the final girl isn't necessarily a final girl. She's the one you got to look out for. And Vince Vaughn is still funny.